Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third seminar in the 2018 Engage seminar series, World Heritage Site, Cities of Inspiration. And welcome to the Royal Liver Building. And this particular location is called the venue. Our three seminars with three World Heritage Site cities have been held in each of the three graces, three of the most beautiful buildings which form the waterfront jewel in the crown of the UNESCO Maritime Mercantile City, inscribed in 2004. We wanted to be inspired by some of the architectural achievements of the past in designing, of which we are rightly proud, and also by the challenges of the present in designing for a World Heritage Site city, which architects and planners are rising to in Strasbourg, Bordeaux, and Hamburg. This iconic Royal Liver building was completed in 1911 and is Grade 1 listed. In 1907, the Royal Liver Assurance Group had over 6,000 employees, and given the need for larger premises, the company gave the go-ahead for the construction of a new head office. Designed by Walter Aubrey Thomas, the foundation for this building was laid on the 11th of May 1908, and just 3 years later, on the 19th of July 1911, the building was officially opened by Lord Sheffield. The building became the first major structure in Britain and one of the first buildings in the world to be constructed using reinforced concrete. And given the building's radical design, was considered by some in the city to be impossible to build. Liverpool delights, however, in making the impossible possible. The three graces continue to inspire us who are privileged to live and work around these magnificent buildings. But we've also been inspired during this seminar series by the stories we've heard from fellow World Heritage Site cities, Strasbourg and Bordeaux. What amazed me with Strasbourg was their determination to develop outside their World Heritage Site boundary and buffer zone, using the same guidelines that they were obliged to use within those boundaries. They saw only synergy between regeneration, progress, and economic and cultural redevelopment, and their desire to create new zones that increased the uniqueness of their cityscape and set them apart from other cities in both scale and massing. The De Rive project was indeed impressive on so many levels. Bordeaux was equally fascinating for different reasons. I was moved by the sheer quality of their historic urban landscape, which had been painstakingly restored as they decided to put heritage at the heart of their regeneration aspirations. So when their new tram system travels through the World Heritage Site core of the city, there are no unsightly overhead cables or indeed tram stops to distract from the backdrop of historic buildings and squares. Such sensitive beauty. But I was equally inspired by the way they delivered the regeneration project in the port area of Bassin-à-Flotte, using negotiated urban planning methods which brought everyone around the same table from the very beginning of the project and resulted in inspirational new architecture and magnificent placemaking. Tonight we're going to hear from Hamburg, another World Heritage Site port city like Liverpool. 5 years ago in 2013, Engage brought Professor Dirk Schubert from HafenCity University in Hamburg to speak about harbour city regeneration plans. This year we returned to Hamburg to hear about how they use their UNESCO status to add value to their city's plans for regeneration and development. Previous generations of Scousers have also turned to Hamburg for inspiration, and clearly the trend continues to this day. From August 1960 to December 1962, the Beatles played in the nightclubs of the St. Pauli district of Hamburg, where they honed their skills and came back to Liverpool a more professional group, ready to take the UK and the world by storm. You know the names of the Beatles, and perhaps even the ones that went to Hamburg and never became part of the Fab Four. But more importantly, do you know the names of those sat around you tonight? So I want to ask you now to just spend a moment introducing yourself by name to the people around you that you never came with. So you can't just talk to the one person that you came with. So turn around and just introduce yourself to those around you. 2 minutes.
If we do the same?
Connecting the city, getting people to know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. You are going to get another opportunity to chat later on. So thank you for meeting somebody new, hopefully. Next, we want to introduce our speakers, and then following their presentations, you will be given a few moments to share your first impressions and reactions with those around you. Then we will go and ask our panel members for their brief reflections, following which I will open the discussion to everyone. We will try to bring the proceedings to a close by 7:30 promptly. Please tweet during the seminar, and the hashtag we're using is hashtag Liverpool WHS, and we are at Engage Liverpool. I want to thank our sponsors who have made possible this series, RS Clare, Brock Carmichael Architects, Planet Intelligent Environments, and Liverpool City Council. First, I want to welcome our three local panellists this evening, and closest to me is Councillor Hetty Wood, who's Chair of Regeneration, Housing and Sustainability Select Committee. Next to her is Peter Jones, who is the Liverpool City Centre Development Management Team Leader. And at the far end of the table is Pete Swift, Director of Planet Intelligent Environments. Now let me introduce our speakers from Hamburg. Next to me on my right is Bernd Paulowitz. He is Hamburg's UNESCO World Heritage Coordinator and has been working as a heritage and cultural information management consultant for the past 20 years. He is a trained historian and political scientist and enriched his studies with a postgraduate degree at the Diplomatic Academy in Vienna. He started his professional career at the UNESCO World Heritage Centre, Paris, in 1999, where he helped them to carry out an analysis of their operational guidelines and a first retroactive inventory. In recent years, he has diversified his work as a consultant and manager in the field of cultural heritage and became Chief Executive of In Situ World Heritage Consulting. He has worked on World Heritage nominations and processes, in particular in Romania, Austria, Germany, and the USA. Other activities included teaching in both France and Germany, moderation of workshops, developing projects and cooperations with ICOMOS International, and in particular with supranatural bodies, that's not supernatural bodies, in Europe. Bernd Paulowitz joined the Department for Heritage Preservation in Hamburg in the summer of 2016 and coordinates there the activities relating to the World Heritage Site. Christoph Schwarzkopf was born in East Germany and studied architecture in Weimar University, graduating in 1989. He spent the next 4 years working in conservation for the Thuringian State Office for the Preservation of Monuments. From 1995 until 2008, he worked privately in his own architectural practice in Erfurt and Weimar. During this period, Christoph continued to work part-time in conservation for the Baden-Württemberg State Office for the Preservation of Monuments, being responsible for heritage in the city of Karlsruhe. Then in 2008, he took the job of conservationist in the city of Hamburg, responsible for the city centre and the port of Hamburg. Throughout his professional career, Christoph has been a lecturer at the University of Applied Sciences in Karlsruhe, where he lectures on the history of architecture and the preservation of listed buildings. He also lectures at HafenCity University in Hamburg, and since 2010 is a member of the board of the Urban Planning Seminar in Hamburg. Finally, since 2015, Christoph has been the spokesperson for the team of urban monument preservation of the Union of State Conservationists in Germany. They're going to do a double act tonight, but first up is Bernd Paulowitz. Please give him a warm welcome.
Jerry, thank you, and thank you for the warm welcome. And first, let me thank Engage Liverpool for inviting us here and giving us the opportunity to talk, and Ellen already for driving us around today and showing already some of the sites. Well, I have come 20 or 30 years ago already to Liverpool when there was still maybe not that much talk about waterfront or anything, and I can't remember that much because my interest was in much different things than it is today. Our talk will go from a macro level on an introduction on Hamburg in comparison a little bit to Liverpool, to specific projects that we want to highlight, and you're happy to afterwards to discuss a little bit more about it. Yes, so that's the first slide. The second slide is already, of course, the connection between Hamburg and Liverpool, which is the Nicolai Church, which was built by an architect, Scott, which was the grandfather of the cathedral architect here. Then, of course, you have a radio tower here and there. It's a port city, and of course, we have a Beatles place, public space named after the Beatles, and a lot of other things reminiscent. So you can go to the club there as well. But of course, we're here to talk about World Heritage, and for Hamburg, one has to say that the cultural heritage of the Konterhaus, of the Speicherstadt and Konterhaus district, warehouse district with the Schiele House is not the first Hamburg World Heritage. The first Hamburg World Heritage was a natural heritage one, which one would not expect if you look at Hamburg, which is the Waddensee, inscribed in 2011 on the World Heritage Site list. Hamburg as well tries to nominate the Sephardic cemetery of Altona and the astrological observation place in Hamburg on the World Heritage list, and we are still working on it. So in my work as World Heritage Coordinator, together in the Heritage Department with my colleagues, we are not only working on one World Heritage sites, but several, and in terms of our coordination and information, we always try to convey as well that there is cultural and natural heritage. The first thing about Hamburg in relation to Liverpool is the size of the city. Hamburg is a conglomerate actually today of 4 cities, which is Altona, Wandsbek, Harburg and Hamburg. And you can see the port is right in the middle of it, and you can't see the sea because the sea is quite far out, many kilometers actually. You have to drive over an hour, 2 hours to get to the sea. So Hamburg is very much reliant on the river Elbe, where the port is situated. You can also maybe see from this comparative picture, well, it's a bit light, in terms of comparison of the port size, this pure size of the container port today that is so present in Hamburg is much bigger than the one in Liverpool at its current state. But on the other hand, there is the World Heritage Site, which is a complete different site. It's a monumental site in Hamburg. It has 26 hectares. It covers 26 hectares, while the site here covers 136 hectares. The buffer zone is 57 hectares in Hamburg, and here it's 750 hectares. So what you're talking about in Liverpool is an urban landscape, and that's very well documented as well in your nomination dossier. While we talk about individual buildings and typologies of buildings and architecture, it's much less concentrated on the history, on everything that comes with it. So also the problems in conservation are posing itself a little bit different, because we are much more posed on a document like safeguarding the Anglican Church or the cathedral as such, and not everything with it. So this already makes a difference. The World Heritage Site is as well, we have, I'm sure you are familiar with the map of the one in Liverpool. It has the views defined. It has a very small buffer zone around the World Heritage Site, because the views from the waterfront or the views across the town with many World Heritage Sites that poses problems are not a main issue in Hamburg, because it's within the city today. The whole site is within a city. It's not within the port anymore, and we will actually show that a little bit. Like on the historic map that you see, this is the history in the medieval times with the defense lines of Hamburg, and it's always the pointer. Yes, I can only show it on one side, unfortunately. So it would lie now here, the World Heritage Site, and the port would be south. So that already is a very different feature. Of course, you have a very strong development, and I always laugh if they put something in red, because some quite ports and protected areas always in red. It looks like a cancer that's spreading. This is the port that spread it between 1860s and 1925, I think, is the spreading. So you can see that there's a huge explosion, and I think you have the same one in Liverpool in terms of port development. The main thing now is that in 1880, in one decade, the site of the Speicherstadt, which is a warehouse district, because it became a free trade zone, was constructed by the city, and out of these smaller housing areas that you see above in the green zone here, this was all like very small tenants places with mixed functions. They were all cleared out. 20,000 people were cleared out in the 1880s with no place to go, and there were canals built to make shipping possible, only with small barks. The deep sea harbor at that time was still the Sandtorkay harbor, and the warehouses were built. 300,000 square meters of depot houses were built within five years. Of course, in this warehouse district, we have to talk about, and that's another similarity, of course, you have in Liverpool with the destruction of the war. You have about 50% of the now World Heritage nominated site that was destroyed. Well, unfortunately, again, this is very light, but the yellow buildings would all be the ones that were wiped out during the war. And we say in the overall warehouse and port area, it was more close to 70% of the buildings that were destroyed. In the period directly after the war, they started thinking about what to do with the inner town, and as the functional and open city movement deriving from the Athens Charter was very much in mode. They wanted to actually open up the city. Luckily, they didn't do that. They didn't flatten out the whole city and build these very open and high-rise buildings in the middle of the town. But what they did do, I hope, yeah, well, no, this is too much light. What they did do, they built a whole road that went from east to west through the main center with this warehouse district still to the south, and they refurbished the whole warehouse district area. So actually in the 1950s you have rebuilt. The main architect was then Karl Morgen of this time, and you find the same volume and size. So actually, even if there were a lot of warehouses destroyed, now you would still find this homogeneous appearance of the whole district, and you can walk through and you have a sunset very nicely with the red bricks, and you can look through the whole canals. It's very nice and very romantic. This is just to give a short on the what's inscribed, and this is no, mainly I have to read that because otherwise I will not take that. Yes, I will take that, because I think the important thing is, I don't know how much you know about the World Heritage Convention, but I think the important thing is that that Hamburg is only inscribed under one criteria, which is the criteria 4, which is more on typology. So its Speicherstadt and Konterhaus district with Schielehaus contains outstanding examples of types of buildings and ensembles that epitomize the consequences of the rapid growth in international trade in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Sounds very familiar, I guess, to your side. Their high-quality designs and functional constructions in the guise of historicism and modernism, respectively, make this an exceptional ensemble of maritime warehouses and modernist office buildings. Historicism, we just discussed, you would call neo-Gothic style. I put this just as a comparison with the Liverpool, and you have got, of course, 3 criteria, which puts you in a whole different situation, because you have town development, town history with it, while we take a certain point in history, if you want. You have much more intangible and tangible heritage to manage in Liverpool, and of course this then makes it that you have 250 years to manage, and even more in terms of the history of the town in terms of World Heritage, and we have 70 years as an overall period with two main areas. The whole story, of course, comes from the contour house, from the historic contour house, where you have a living area in the middle, and on the side of the canals you have the warehouse where the goods would come in, and on the contour they would be cleared out on the other side. The warehouse district that was then constructed clearly served only one of these issues, and housing or office building was not served with this. This led to that in the close by inner city there was a huge housing problem, and this was then cleared out to build the office buildings of the Konterhaus district. But I guess I'm jumping a little bit. It's just to again to give an impression on this poles that were used to construct the city. So there were 1.3 million poles, like in Venice, put into the center of the town to construct these new canals and support these warehouse buildings. And this is very much still visible today. You have as well, there is one homogeneous design between the deep port on the one side and the different barks and canals, and how the buildings were constructed with all the technical construction. They put in electricity at the time. They had a boiler house. So within 10 years, they set up a whole town, really, that gives, in the end impression, a very neo-Gothic or romantic-looking castle-like town where the unload zones that were only 1 floor high would be, and the outsides would build like walls to the town. This is just to have the two monofunctional office and warehouse district in comparison that are World Heritage today. I would just run through quickly to the pictures, because I think not all of you can maybe very well see them, but it's just to give you this impression of this neo-Gothic historicism warehouse district that was built in the 19th century with, oops, this does not work, and very important, the commerçants, the mercantile people invested in particular in the administrative buildings. And there is one thing that the warehouse district has as a singularity. It was a company, the town found a company to build the warehouse district, and still up to the day, it's this company that runs this warehouse and owns this warehouse district, and it's 100% owned by the town. So this helps us, of course, a lot in terms of when we talk to or make a planning for the whole warehouse district that's now heritage protected, because we have only one person to talk to in this part of the World Heritage Site. So this makes it easy for the World Heritage Coordination, and they are very much beforehand they wanted to demolish the warehouse district to build housing and lofts close to the city center. But once it was protected and once they themselves realized the value of it, now they are very much in work with us together to make it stand out and make it unique and actually make a lot of repair works in the district. You have a very high ornamentic features on the warehouse buildings, and I just want to make 2-3 slides on the Konterhaus district, just not to disregard it. But so these office buildings with rented office space, which would be very much like this space here, is the second part of the World Heritage Site with 8 main office complexes with 36,000 square meters for the Schiele House alone, which is the iconic building here on the left with the prow of the ship, if you are close by, which really comes up if you walk around the corner, and is really an iconic building for Hamburg overall. This again is a map showing the now current state of the different buildings that are within the World Heritage site or area. So you would have the yellow ones would be the ones that were constructed after 1970s, and not just outside but one building of the World Heritage property, while the blue ones would be the ones from 1871 to 1899 constructed, and in this last phase of the warehouse district from 1899 to 1918, this part, and then of course the Konterhaus district on the other side from 1919 to 1945, well actually 1950s. But I think one important thing about the destruction of the war in Hamburg is to say that the Konterhaus district was not touched at all. It was the Western Front, as one can see here, that was very much touched by the air raids of the Allies. So we were very lucky that the office buildings actually nearly stayed on unharmed. So this again is in comparison with Liverpool, is to show that actually the World Heritage boundaries, the core zone would be the white one, but everything that's red is protected, and we have protection zones under National Heritage Law, which brings us to how heritage is protected. World Heritage doesn't add another layer of protection. It's a recognition that heritage is protected well enough, sustainably enough by the nation state that nominates a site. And so all this, the red zone would be the one, even if it's outside the World Heritage Site, would have the same heritage protection than the one within the National World Heritage Site, and we would apply the same rules. There is also no grade 1 or grade 2 protection. There is only one. It's either heritage or it isn't. And also the pavements outside are protected, also the surroundings areas, so also the zones that come with it. How is now the World Heritage organized in Hamburg? Well, Hamburg has given itself a new heritage law in 2016, the Heritage Protection Act, and there is a stipulation within this Protection Act under 7.8, paragraph 7.8, that actually everything that has to be done out that would concern the World Heritage Convention has to be dealt with by this heritage law and in respect of the heritage law. And the World Heritage Convention has to be respected. So this is very important, because this also comes to why I am here and why, for example, in Liverpool, the World Heritage Coordination is in the urban planning or in other departments, while in Hamburg it's in the heritage department, because this law actually settles the dealing with the World Heritage within the heritage department. So another thing one has to say in terms of management is that you have 16 Länders in Germany, and the Länders have the sovereignty over cultural heritage, meaning each land has its own heritage law. So Hamburg is sovereign in giving itself its heritage law and what should be stipulated in the heritage law. And so this is time, we're running out of time. So I will just swap this over, that how it's integrated. I think one of the other important points that I wanted to make is that how we protect, and we have a lot of layers of protection of different plannings, tools, and so on that all add up to the UNESCO World Heritage Management Plan. I've always found the management plan not that useful. I've always found all the other tools, because they are real legally binding tools within the town, useful. And actually for me, a World Heritage Plan was always more a World Heritage system, like to show that we are able to do it. But the planning was really done within the inner city town plan, what was stipulated there, for example, how in future, oops, now I have to turn around again. How we would in future move or try to have pedestrians move throughout the inner town, how the whole World Heritage Site is only a part, and that's the big difference, I guess, for Liverpool. It's only a smaller part within the whole town development. How it's respected in there, how the traffic will work in future, and how the quarters will work together. So the World Heritage Management Plan of Hamburg would not actually deal with that, because that's a much larger area. So this inner city town planning is much more important for the whole dealing with how it interacts. I just want to show, don't read all of them, but these are the current, the top is cut. These are the current projects within the World Heritage Site and buffer zone. I think the main ones that one has to mention is the quay wall renovation, because the poles that were pulled in the 19th century slowly now degrade, and we have to actually do something about, and this is, I think, it will cost, I don't know, about 100 million euros to restore it for the whole of the warehouse district, which is of course a huge investment where there is no return of investment, but to have a nice protected heritage site. But the town is willing to do so. And one, it's cut off, it's the Cityhof, which is a modernist building, which we will talk shortly about. I will jump and then give the word. So, yes. So, the Konterhaus district and the Cityhof. You can see here the modernist building from the 1950s, which are in this open and functional style, in contrast to the block-filling Konterhaus district. And actually the town would like to demolish these buildings, and we are in discussion with UNESCO and ICOMOS on how to work on this. And the Heritage Department actually, not only the town planning, but also the Heritage Department believes that this might be the right way to go, and this is the new plan that is actually proposed in a plan that we think is much closer to the Konterhaus district. And now I will hand over to Christoph.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you also for the warm welcome. And now I want to explain a little bit about projects in the buffer zone and also in HafenCity. And this is a project, there was a competition to develop this project for in the surrounding of the World Heritage Zone, in the buffer zone. And when we came in, we both came into the jury, then we saw the plan, the drawings, and we said, okay, this is the only plan would would work to design this building there. I can show you here. This is the design in the is a little bit similar to the buildings here in the Konturhaus Viertel, and so we thought this would be possible, and it's an architecture which fits with what fits in the whole area of the Konturhaus Viertel, and it's not an exalted architecture. And this other people said, okay, if you build a new building here, it must be exalted architecture, it must be a high-class architecture, but our plan as, in the buffer zone was that the value is in the World Heritage Zone here, and with the Chile House, and that the new buildings must be, they must fit in the Kontor House quarter. Other project is, you know, from Dirk Schubert, is the HafenCity, and this was the story. The HafenCity is the area of the port of Hamburg, which was not more suitable after containerization of the world trade, and so it became empty from use, and so the city of Hamburg decided to buy all the areas they didn't own at that time, and only after they bought them at all, then they offered the new master plan, and this is one drawing of the master plan was made by Gerkan Mark and Partner, and the master plan was as follow. You had buildings here from the Speicherstadt. They are on the left-hand side, the red drawn buildings, and then they designed, instead of the large halls I will show in the next pictures, they decide buildings maximum of with 20 meters height. Only in some points where high-rise buildings like in the right corner there, and on here in this area it is on the bottom is where today is the so-called Elbphilharmonie, the Philharmonie of Hamburg. And this was in the first master plan. Also these points for high-rise buildings were designed, and this is until up to now we use this master plan for realization. This is the Speicherstadt, the warehouse town, and in the here is the Centaur Harbor. It was the first harbor basin for the new design in 1865. It was opened, and it has connection with railway too. And you see here are the large halls in front of the warehouse. Of the warehouses of the Speicherstadt, and here is this is the tower of the St. Nikolai Church from Gilbert Scott the Elder, and you see here in 1980 still existed the larger halls, and then they were demolished in 1990, and they started to fill in the water basin also with sand, but then it stopped, and the city of Hamburg decided to preserve also the Speicherstadt and to build here the new HafenCity. And you can see this is a photograph from 2015, and instead of the halls have been built, then the buildings with maximum 8 floors, and on the left and on the right hand side, and in the background you can see this was where they started to fill in the harbor basin. This is a view back to the river Elbe is here, and this is a movable bridge here, and you see this is a so-called warehouse A, where today has been built. It's from 1963, and then was built here the Elbphilharmonie. This is the warehouse number A, and this is the Elbphilharmonie was built. And in fact, the skyline of Hamburg was changed. It changed after the 18th century. You can see here it's a skyline from the 18th century with high-rise church towers and with a fortress here, And then after the Speicherstadt, the warehouse town has been built, the first changes of the skyline took place, and the second change, this was also in the first design of the HafenCity, it was planned that they said, okay, the Speicherstadt changed the skyline and we change it now with HafenCity a second time. It was decided in the 1990s. We may regret this, but it was a clear decision. If you see what happened in 2015 in Hamburg, it was discussed to apply for the Olympic Games in 2024, and it's a design also by Gerkan, Mark and Partner, and you see here there are the harbor basins, several, and also here, but there was also planned a new stadium, but nobody has an idea to plan the stadium in a former harbor basin. And you can see here the actual use of the harbor places here, and this is the plan to build their stadium. But it was discussed with a large publicity, and many people discussed it in the process, and in the end, or for instance the workers working in the area in the port, and in the end there was a vote against, a public vote against the Olympic Games for Hamburg, and so it was decided to stop the process, and Hamburg didn't apply for the Olympic Games. Next project is Cremon 1. It is in the buffer zone of Hamburg. From the warehouse town, you can see here it is located. Here's the warehouse town, the canals. Here's the Sandtor harbor, and a little bit closer is here. You see what we do then if we check a project for a new development in our office, in the preservation office. Then we at first check the old maps and compare what has been there. And this is a map compared from the situation 1800 and 1990. And here you can see here are old buildings on this side of the canal, and here are also some older buildings, and this is an empty space here where in former times also existed a building. This is the damage map of Hamburg, and in the red line you see the new project, and there is a gray building in the red line. This building was pulled down in the 1960s to enlarge the street Hohe Brücke and to make a more bright bridge here. Only the building on the left-hand side of the canal, it still exists, and you can see it on this picture. On the left-hand side, the building from the 1910 still exists, and on the other hand side, they built in the 1960s a new building, and on the corner are only some green trees. And and they wanted to enlarge the building on the right-hand side of the canal. And so I recommended, no, it's impossible because we have listed buildings on the left-hand side of the canal, and it's impossible to put here two floors on top. And I recommended then to say would be better to build here a new building to have this gate situation on the canal. And so they designed then a new building. A little bit it's similar to the shape of the left-hand building. It's a house of the ships. Okay. So it was a design, it was forced by our office and by urban preservation. The next project is not in the World Heritage Zone, but it's the Harburg Port project. Bernd told that we have in Hamburg 4 cities. Harburg is south of River Elbe, and here was in former times the most important North Sea port of the Kingdom of Hanover, because it was a part of Kingdom of Hanover until 1866. And you see it's a former fortress here, and this is a demolition plan from 1945, and you see everything what is in the yellow color was demolished. And this is the situation in 2010, and then was made a master plan for this area because the industry was removed from there. And the master plan was to fix the fortress situation here. You can see it. These are buildings, not high-rise, mostly not high-rise buildings on this island, and these are buildings for offices and for apartments. And on the corner, you can see here a white building. It's a silo for grain from 1919. Then was made a zoning plan, took in account the master plan which was developed. And you see here are the historic cobblestones in the Lotsekai, and this is on this island, and they also have been preserved now in the development of this area. This is a former, it's the former palace, but it was changed into an apartment block in 1903. And this was the silo, and the silo was also damaged in World War II. And then the developer wanted to make here also apartment inside, but it didn't work. And so we said, okay, you can. It was a listed building too, and we said then, because we realized it would be impossible because it was all in all it was a ruin. Then we said, okay, but you must build there a new building similar to silo to have this shape for remember for the history of this island, and so they did it. And I think it is a solution is possible in this way. I think it's not normal to find this solution, but I think there may be a case where this is a possibility to develop such an area, with also a little bit like a copy of the former building. The last here is other street also in this harbor of Harburg. This is a former palace street, and here have been developed after competition a new area of housing buildings, and they are a little bit suitable to the older buildings which are still existing here in this area. These are also listed buildings. The last picture shows one of the canals of the Harburg port, and you see it's this time it's very silent. There is not any trade in it, but nobody has an idea to fill in these harbor basins. This is in Hamburg. It's unbelievable to do this, because every developer has realized that the value of the waterfronts, and so they will be used, and this time is developed here also a large project in this area. So I think I gave a short time some examples for development in Hamburg, and now I'm interested to get your response. Thank you.